Thank you very much, Senator Hawley. I feel like a kid from East St. Louis in the presence of a lot of St. Louisans. I hope that I can stand up for my side of the river, at least to some extent. Let me ask a few questions. Mr. Devine, you have referred to yourself as a zealot for the anti-choice movement. You previously wrote, and I quote, "Because we know a genetically unique human comes into existence at fertilization, abortion should not be ethically permitted." Let me ask you a couple questions. Do you believe an IVF embryo is a person?
Thank you, Senator. My answer to that question and any policy question or political question that might be asked of me is going to be the same exact answer that I know this committee has heard from hundreds of nominees before me, that Justice Kagan gave, that Justice Barrett gave. I cannot talk about political disputes. That is obviously a hotly litigated issue and hotly disputed issue right now, so I just cannot, under the canons of judicial ethics, talk about those kinds of political disputes.
That's what I expected to hear. Do you believe in vitro fertilization should not be, quote, ethically permitted, close quote?
Can you tell me where the quote is coming from?
I'll try to find that from the staff while you're thinking about the answer.
So I don't know the context of that, of what you're quoting to me right now.
We're looking for the exact source on that. So let's go to another question along that all the other members of this panel might address. I'm not going to get into the point made by Senator Blackburn about one of our witnesses yesterday saying she had some equivocation on following court orders. But as been demonstrated by Senator Hawley, this panel has extensive court experience. So the question I'd like to ask of each of you, do you believe that the executive branch of our government should be allowed to defy a court order? Mr. Bluestone?
Thank you, Senator. I would have to take some caution in answering that question because this is a hotly litigated issue right now. But I would echo what we heard earlier in the hearing today that, generally speaking, that is, of course, the rule.
Mr. Devine?
Thank you, Senator. My understanding of the doctrine is it is almost always required that you obey a court order. The only exceptions are for if there's a lack of jurisdiction, if there's impossibility. There is a well-recognized doctrine of exceptions to that, and so you would have to check to see whether something fell within one of those very rare exceptions.
But that would lead to an appeal, would it not?
Certainly you can appeal, and you would typically do that sort of thing in a jurisdictional setting. There have been cases before where a court has ordered somebody to do something that was literally impossible for them to comply with, and then in response to sanctions motion or whatever, they've defended themselves.
Would that be the only exception you can think of?
There's a doctrine of well-recognized exceptions. There are some other situations in, for example, in privilege issues. If a court has ordered somebody to disclose something and they're claiming privilege, sometimes in certain states especially, sometimes they actually have to defy that order to appeal it. That's the only way to appeal it, and that's a recognized exception in those circumstances.
But there is a legal process that you follow if you're going to assert that sort of defense, correct?
That is correct.
And if you don't assert that, if you accept this as a final order, are you bound to follow that order?
I stand by my previous answer. There's a doctrine of exceptions, but in almost all circumstances, the answer is yes.
Ms. Lanahan?
Thank you. I would agree, basically, that the typical rule is that parties before a court are bound by that court order. I think there have been a couple of exceptions that the panel has discussed, but I think as a general matter, that is correct. I wouldn't want to go into specifics because this is a hotly litigated issue, as Ms. Hermendorfer had talked about earlier.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes, Senator Durbin. As a judge, I do expect parties to follow my orders. Obviously, there's been references to other narrow exceptions to that rule. Frankly, with almost 4 years on the bench, I haven't encountered any of those exceptions. So, yeah, I expect.
But in each one, I want to make this clear. If you have a court order applying to you, you have to follow it or appeal it. That's my conclusion. Is that yours?
Well, I expect that parties will follow my orders, yes.
Well, I'm asking you whether or not you not only expect it, whether that is part of the rule of law in America. And I think it is, isn't it?
Well, I think, yes, there's a process, obviously, before our court. If a litigant doesn't like a decision that they've gotten in our court, then they can ask for transfer from the Missouri Supreme Court.
Mr. Devine, the quote comes from the Mirror, October 6, 2010. In the Mirror, you called yourself a zealot for the pro-life movement. So I'll ask the question again. Do you believe in vitro fertilization should not be ethically permitted?
Senator, I don't share the characterization of the article, which was written when I was a teenager. When I used the term zealot, I was using the same term you used in the March 26th hearing earlier this year, which is if you're an advocate for a cause, you have a duty to advocate that cause energetically. I think Americans of all stripes, if they believe in an issue, they should advocate those issues energetically.
So where are you on in vitro fertilization?
Senator, I don't think any of my articles in college, and I've disclosed over 200, has ever taken a position on that.
Forget your college. I'm sure it was an exciting experience. Let's talk about now. You want a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, and I'd like to know your position on in vitro fertilization.
Senator, you said you weren't surprised by my previous answer, which has been given by hundreds of nominees before me. I can't talk about those politically contentious issues.
After Alabama made that fateful ruling about saying that an IVF embryo was a person, there was an effort by most mainstream people in politics in both parties to clarify their position on in vitro fertilization, including the current president of the United States. The fact that this panel is, at least Mr. Devine, is struggling with that is unfortunately a tell as to what we can expect from you if your nomination is approved. I yield.